In the last couple of months, I've really been getting into game consoles, and especially retro consoles. And I and partially Leon now own a Nintendo Entertainment System, a PS2, an Xbox 360, a PS4, a Wii, a GameCube, an Xbox One, a Nintendo DSi, a Nintendo DS Lite, a Nintendo 2DS, a broken Magnavox Odyssey 2, and once owned a broken Atari Home Pong, which is the first Atari home console. And before this video starts, I just wanted to quickly say that if you end up liking this video, please consider liking and subscribing with notifications turned on for more content in the future. That said, let's get on with the video. It all started in March of this year, which is not anymore this year, which it was 2020, on my 15th birthday. Bear in mind that at this point, Leon had nothing to do at all with this whole operation. That was when I told my mother that I wanted a Nintendo Entertainment System. While this was only a couple of days before my birthday, my mother fortunately hadn't already purchased so much stuff that it was completely impossible to get an NES, but as I already said, it was only a couple days before my birthday, so she didn't really have any time to order it online and had to look for it on a site called eBay Kleinanzeigen, which is, for those of you who don't know, a site like Craigslist, where you can sell your stuff to people in your closer area. But the thing was that there weren't really any here, so she couldn't get one for me in time, so she just gave me the money so I could choose one myself. And maybe a game too. While I could have just bought the next best thing, I wasn't really interested in just throwing out my money and not getting the best thing or experience that I could have gotten. So that kind of forced me into looking into it a bit more than I intended. Back then, I only wanted to play Super Mario Bros. On it. I mean, maybe there was a small factor that there was me as a computer geek just wanting it because I thought it was cool to have a computer like this at home. But it was never my intention to get completely caught up in this topic and basically learn everything about it to the point where I could probably host a several-day event only talking about all the different stuff I found out about the industry, which definitely doesn't mean that I am the god of consoles and know more about it than everybody else, because at the end of the day I only got the information from other people. So I think what I'm trying to say is that this whole thing took a very different direction than I thought. Well, there I was, with my €70 budget, searching online for the best deal I could get. The criteria I had were that I wanted an NES with a minimum of 2 controllers and Super Mario Bros. After a bit of searching, I quickly found what I was looking for and bought it. It was a slightly yellow, not in the best condition NES that came with a very bad condition Super Mario Bros. Cartridge, which I sadly didn't care about back then, because now I will have to buy another copy of Super Mario Bros. At one point to have it look nice on my shelf.
To make the console look at least a little bit better, we first of all did a little restoration on the NES itself and the controllers. At first we wanted to do a video on that too, but we really didn't want to have to put up a camera every time we wanted to do something, because that takes all the fun away from the actual restoration, or whatever we are doing at the moment. If we are going to do something like that in the future, we will get either a multi-camera setup with all of them mounted and easily accessible so that it isn't such a hassle, or we will just get another person to help us out as a camera operator. Anyway, the NES. First of all, we took the console and the controllers apart and checked for any leaked capacitors or stuff like that, but fortunately we found nothing like that and could just move on to cleaning all the different parts. First of all, the main shell pieces, then the little black edge pieces, which were pretty scratched up, which is why Julian decided to very carefully polish them with a Dremel. The problem with that is that you can't really polish plastic like metal, for example, because when polishing it, it can happen that due to friction, the object you're polishing gets very hot, which isn't a problem with metal, but plastic has a much lower melting point than most metals, and that kind of got him when he turned around to his brother, who entered his room for like 3 seconds and held the Dremel on the plastic piece for too long. Obviously it melted. I mean, it wasn't too big of a problem because there was already a dented, scratched, melty spot on it before, but he kind of enlarged it, so he stopped the polishing immediately. Because first of all, we obviously did not want to risk any more damage, and we also were happy with how the other pieces looked already, so we just moved on to cleaning the power and reset buttons, the controller shells, the button membranes, and the buttons. With all of that done, and honestly most of it in a much better condition than we initially thought it would get to, because apparently it was just pretty dirty, the last thing we had to do something about was the yellowing of the chassis, and to some extent the controllers. Even though the cartridge shell had a bit of yellowing too, Julian and I really didn't bother to retrobrite this, because at the time we didn't have the correct screwdriver for it, and did not want to wait until it arrived from Amazon. And as Julian already said, we wanted to buy a new one anyways too. So Julian drove to the next pet store-ish place and bought a bottle of H2O2, or hydrogen peroxide pond cleaner. We poured it in an old photo development dish with some water and put the pieces in it, weighted them down so they would not float to the top, and let them sit in there. But then disaster struck when we checked on it half an hour later and saw that we had made a terrible mistake. When putting weights on the pieces so they wouldn't float to the top, we used iron nails, which is a no-go with hydrogen peroxide because it is a pretty strong oxidizer and basically instantly oxidizes everything, including my nails, which even had big chunks of them eaten away by the rust. We quickly took all of them out and replaced them with marbles and these flat glass drop things, and even though the plastic did have some stains from the rust, they were all in places where you would not see them instantly, and mostly they went away with a lot of scrubbing afterwards. Then all that was left was the reassembly, which we didn't film, but there wasn't really anything interesting there other than Julian switching the controller ports around like an idiot and not noticing until everything is completely together again. We just left it then because we were too lazy to take it completely apart again, but at some point Julian would probably switch them back. But if we do that, we'll buy new screws too, because in the process of this we stripped a couple of them and we would definitely not get it back apart and together again with those screws.
After a couple of months, we got a bit tired of only playing Super Mario Bros. So we decided that we needed more games. We looked around online, and even though there were many different games for it that we could have been interested in buying, like Ice Climber, Mega Man, Zelda, and many more, we decided that it would be the best idea to just buy Super Mario Bros. 2 and 3, because I just really love those types of games, which is probably for the most part because my first real game that I played a lot of was New Super Mario Bros. For my Nintendo DSi, which I got when I was 6 years old. I probably played hundreds, if not thousands or even tens of thousands of hours of that game back then. So we searched eBay and eBay Kleinanzeigen for the games, this time with the manual, the black cartridge sleeve, the cardboard packaging, and in the best case scenario the little styrofoam inserts too. We quickly found both of those games for about $40 each, which I was happy with, if you consider that the first Zelda in worse condition than what we picked up here costs about $100. One of them actually came with the styrofoam insert, the other one not, but that's okay, we're just gonna buy a new one for that at one point. The manual of Super Mario Bros. 3 was a bit wrinkled, but after a week under a stack of books, it was good enough for me. I also bought 10 plastic cases for the cardboard cases, because I do not want them to get scratched, bent, stepped on, or anything like that. And as a bonus, it also looks much better than before. We're planning on getting little plastic wrappers for the manuals, replacement cartridge sleeves, and styrofoam inserts for future games too, so that we don't have to buy them so expensive in the full set. But we haven't bought those yet. A couple months after acquiring the NES, I decided that I really liked retro consoles and games, and wanted to try something else in that field. So I told Leon about this cool thing I've been getting into, and we scoured eBay again and found a PS2 Slim for €35, just a couple kilometers away. So me and Leon drove there and picked it up. It came with obviously the console, the power cable, the original video cable as a proprietary, one controller, an 8MB memory card, and as a big surprise for us, a game. Tomb Raider Anniversary Edition to be exact. Sadly, no case for the game though, but as it's an add-on that we didn't expect at all in the first place, that is okay. The condition of most of it is basically perfect, except the glossy part of the top of the PS2 is a bit scratched, but I'm fine with that, and it would be very hard to find one where that is not the case, as this happens very easily. Even the Tomb Raider disc was very good, because as it seems, this was the only game the previous owner owned, and she probably never took it out of the console, so there wasn't really any kind of restoration needed here, even though I don't even know how that would have worked.
Even though we now already had one game, we didn't know that before, so we had already purchased 3 other games off of eBay Kleinanzeigen. Each of these was only €1.50 because they are, let's say, not the most mainstream releases for the consoles. We got Shocks by EA Sports Big, which is a pretty nice racing game. Roller Coaster World by Midas Interactive Entertainment, or Midas, or I don't know, where you build your own amusement park, and RPM Tuning by Wanadu, which is another racing game where you, as the name suggests, tune your car to be faster than the other cars. Even though Roller Coaster World and RPM Tuning are not really my personal favorites, I think it was a good choice to buy them because Shocks alone is totally worth the €4.50. As an addition, we also purchased another controller, so me and Julian can play together for about €35. As you might have noticed, we didn't mention that we have or had a Wii U at any point in time, because we never had one. So why do I talk about it? Well, it's because we almost did. After we bought the PS2, we wanted another console, but this time a more modern one, that maybe also has YouTube or something like that, so we can watch it at our TVs. We quickly found a very good offer, €50 for a Wii U with all the needed accessories. It seemed too good to be true, and it was. When we sent them our money, we never heard back from them, and the worst is we couldn't even do anything about it because we had no contact info from them and used PayPal Friends, which is non-refundable. So what I'm trying to say is that you should be careful when buying stuff online like this and never use PayPal Friends when you don't know the seller personally. After that failed attempt of buying a Wii U, we decided to buy another old console, in this case a GameCube, because that was the other option when we bought the PS2, either that or a GameCube, and even though the GameCube was my preferred option, we bought the PS2 because we found that amazing deal of 3 games for €1.50 each. So we looked if that listing for a GameCube we looked at before was still up, and indeed it still was. So we contacted the seller and got the price down from 60 to €50. The next day we drove there and picked it up, and again, the console, the power brick, which is proprietary this time, the video cable, which is proprietary too, one controller, and a game. All in pretty good condition. The game is Mario Kart Double Dash, which is in many people's eyes the best or one of the best games in the Mario Kart franchise ever created. I mean, undoubtedly it's at least one of the more unique ones, with its dual driver mechanic where every driven car can hold their own item, and you can switch them mid-race. It's certainly a very nice game, but sadly I broke my hand a couple of days after we bought the GameCube, so I couldn't really hold the GameCube controller. The PS2 controller was okay, but the GameCube one just would not fit into my hand. So I couldn't play it for a couple of weeks. Which was not that bad because we only had one controller so far, and playing it alone, well, it's still great fun, it's not even half as nice as playing it together with friends or family.
Obviously, the next thing we did once his hand was cured was buying a second controller. But real GameCube controllers are surprisingly expensive, at least here in Germany. So we decided that it was also good enough to have aftermarket Wii branded one, and oh it was. In my opinion, the buttons feel so much better than the real GameCube ones. They have a million times more travel, which not everyone might see as a good thing, but together with the great tactile feedback and the almost exactly real GameCube-like triggers, it's just an unbeatable combo. We didn't buy any other games for the console yet, but that is definitely something we have planned for the near future, as we heard from many people that, for example, Smash for the platform is apparently very good. Well, the Atari Home Pong. This one was kind of a sad story. At some point, I was in a call with Leon, and we talked about consoles and stuff, when I for some reason googled what the first Atari console was. This was when I found out about the Atari Home Pong. I was immediately amazed by it and wanted one at all costs, but I couldn't find one anywhere, until I looked on the American eBay store, where there was a single listing for it. Or rather, the Sears Telegames, but that is kind of the same thing as an Atari Home Pong C100, and it was at €30, so I just had to bid on it. Well, me and Leon did, but as we didn't really understand how eBay bidding worked at the time, we bid way too much in the attempt to understand what was going on. We bid €100, which is not necessarily overpriced, but certainly way over budget. In the end, we got it for €80, plus shipping, which wasn't cheap either, because the item came all the way from the US to Germany. It came to a grand total of around 110 euros, which is much, considering the item was listed as not tested, but we don't know that at the time, because it was only mentioned if you clicked on a link on a website where you got to by clicking a link in the item's description. So we only saw that after we had already bought it. After a few days, when it finally arrived at Leon's house, we got in a Discord call and he unpacked it. Even though we didn't know if it worked, we were confident that it would, because it looked very good from a visual standpoint. No corroded battery contacts, a working power supply, or as Atari calls it, battery eliminator. Not very many scratches on the outside, and it was generally in a pretty good condition. So a few days later, I plugged everything in and it worked, which is everything I could see, as I didn't plug it into a monitor. At least for like 30 seconds it worked, when I noticed the progressively increasing volume of the humming that the power supply was giving up. I ran to the socket it was plugged into, but before I could pull it out the socket, I heard two pop sounds, one from the power supply and the other one from the console. As I said earlier, it was from the US, so it used their socket type and 110 volt power standard. And because we are in Germany and here we use 230 volt power, we need an adapter. And I specifically looked that it reduced the voltage, but as it was a two-part set and it was very poorly, and with very poorly I mean not at all labeled, that only one of them changed the voltage, and obviously it had to be the one I was not using. So the 230 volts immediately killed both the console and the power supply. I mean, I would have still kept it as a nice vintage piece on my shelf, but every time I looked at it, I was reminded that I broke it, and that kind of ruined it for me. So I sold it as broken on eBay for like 30 bucks. That's basically the end of the story. I'm still looking for another one to buy, but first of all, you can most of the time get one of them on eBay, but I really want one with a battery eliminator, as I don't want to have to put like 4D batteries into it every time I want to use it. And secondly, I'm not really willing to spend like 150 euros plus on one of them, when I could just buy more games for the consoles I already have and get more out of it for the price.
Many of you might ask yourself, well, what is a Magnavox Odyssey 2, as it is not very often talked about these days. The Magnavox Odyssey 2, or as it is called in Germany, the Philips G7000, because Magnavox is the daughter company of Philips, is the predecessor of the infinitely more popular Magnavox Odyssey. The Magnavox Odyssey was the first ever home video game console. It was very primitive because it used overlays that you put on the screen to show the different playing fields for the games. You could switch between games with cartridges, but all of the very limited number of games were saved on the console itself, and the cartridges were just pin-to-pin connectors that told the console which game to play. The Magnavox Odyssey 2 was, compared to that, 100 times more mature. It had, like the Atari 2600, real cartridges with games on them, and for some reason a keyboard. Yeah, a keyboard on a console, and a very bad one for sure. It was one of those very cheap membrane keyboards without any tactile feedback, which just felt like you were pressing a table. Well, then how did we end up with one of those? After the disaster that the purchase of the Atari Home Pong console was, Julian really wanted one of those really old consoles. So we looked on eBay for any in our area, but we couldn't really find any, until at some point Julian saw this Magnavox Odyssey 2 for 60 euros just a couple kilometers from his house. Obviously he instantly contacted the seller and asked if we could come and get it. One day later, Julian and I were on the way to the place where we were set to meet up at some football field, which was not very easy to find, so we were a bit late and the guy was already gone. After a bit of searching for him, we gave up and contacted him, but he didn't reply. Always when we left the application and came back, the messages were all gone, so we wrote him again and again, but all the messages were deleted except like every 20th one or so. So we sent him Julian's phone number again and again and asked him to call him. After like 20 minutes we finally got a call and we could discuss how we would go about that. He came back to the football field and gave us the console, we gave him the money and we went home. The package included the console, the power adapter, 2 controllers, which were not attached, and Video Pack 1, which is this weird method of labeling the cartridges Philips chose. Instead of, just saying what game it actually is, it just gets you a number and you have to remember what it is. But when we were testing the system, it wouldn't turn on. There were no signs of life in it whatsoever, so we had to contact the seller again and ask for a refund. He kindly agreed and even let me keep the console and all the accessories, which were probably all fine, we just had no use for them without a working console. Julian thought that maybe he could fix it, but sadly he couldn't. We are probably going to sell it to someone with more technical skill than him that will probably be able to fix it, like the Atari HomePod.
The Wii is kind of both, the first and the second newest console I own. Both a first edition with GameCube compatibility and a second edition without. But because I, or rather me and my siblings, got a Wii in 2010 for Christmas, and even though we theoretically had a Nintendo DS they often used before that, that doesn't really count, because first of all, it's a handheld, and secondly, it wasn't really mine. It belonged to my mother. And I bought another Wii a couple months ago, because the other one wasn't mine alone, so I couldn't put it into my room. And I found one for like $40, and it even was in a pretty good condition. So we bought it together with one original Wii remote, Mario Kart Wii, New Super Mario Bros. Wii, and all the accessories, including the box. This one was the first edition one with the GameCube compatibility. I specifically decided to buy a first edition Wii because even though I do already have a real GameCube, there is still the advantage that if, for example, Leon has the GameCube and I have the Wii, I can still play a GameCube game that is not currently in use by Leon. Afterwards, we didn't specifically buy any other games or accessories, but as I already owned a Wii before that, I had some stuff lying around. Specifically 4 Wii Motion Plus controllers, all the accessories that it originally came with, a Skylanders portal, a lot of Skylanders figurines, and a whole bunch of games, specifically Skylanders Spyro's Adventures and Skylanders Giants, Wii Sports, Anno Create a New World, Wii Sports Resort, Wii Play Motion, Kirby's Adventure, How to Train Your Dragon, and Driver San Francisco. So we were pretty loaded from the beginning. I'm planning to in the future buy some more accessories, like for example a wireless sensor bar or extra cables, so we can move it easily from my house to Leon's house, but as we didn't do that yet, there is nothing else to talk about here.
And now, the last one of all our consoles, and it is actually the one that kind of doesn't fit the scheme, as it is, as you saw, an Xbox One, which is not anymore, but at the time we bought it, the newest console generation, as opposed to all the other ones, like the NES or the Wii, or basically anything, which are all old, aka retro consoles. And yes, that is true, that it kinda doesn't fit in that regard, but it being a console was not the only reason why we bought it, so that explains that purchase. One of the other things we bought it for was to have it as a smart TV box, so that we could watch Netflix, YouTube, Prime Video, or basically anything on it that we want. And for that, it actually works great. Sadly, we can't connect it to the internet via Ethernet at Julian's house because that does not allow him to add it to their network, but fortunately, the Wi-Fi antennas in it are so good that he can just use it. And like, that is quite a statement because their router is literally on the other end of the house, as far away as possible from the spot where his TV is positioned, to the point that if he enters his room with a Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge connected to their Wi-Fi, he loses any sort of connection and has to leave the room again to reconnect and use the Wi-Fi elsewhere, while the Xbox just plays even 1080p video fine most of the time. So what did we exactly buy? Well, we decided to go with an Xbox One S instead of the beefier Xbox One X. We chose the Xbox of the S variety because it was a lot cheaper to buy second hand with the 125 euros we paid for it, instead of the 250 that a One X would have set us back. And for that price it came with a console, all the original accessories including one white Xbox One controller, and it was in almost perfect condition, basically like new except some dirt in the seams of the controller. The seller also listed like 10 games together with the console, but none of them sounded really any interesting to us except maybe Far Cry 5, so we asked him if we could get only the consoles with all the accessories and Far Cry, and he agreed. Since then, we haven't really bought anything else, and even though we only have one controller and one game, I am actually happy with it right now, and I'm not intending to buy any more stuff for this console in the near future, because I want to have more of a backlog of games and accessories for all the other older consoles first. And I imagine the Xbox One stuff will drop in price considerably when the Series X and Series S take over the Xbox side of the market. If I would buy one other thing, it would be a second controller to play a free Brawl Stars Smash clone type game together with Julian.
those are basically all the consoles we have bought since 1st of March 2020, when the console collection started with the NES. But there's theoretically a couple other consoles that I or Leon owned partially or just had them before starting this. As I or Leon probably already said somewhere in this video, the first real home console that I got my hands on in my home, and not just in a shop or at a friend's house, was my Nintendo Wii. But if we count handheld, the first one was actually my mom's and later my brother's Nintendo DS with our 4 cards in them that had totally legitimate digital versions of many games on them. But primarily what I played was Crayola, but not really the adventure mode. I just wanted to draw stuff. New Super Mario Bros. I freaking love that game to this day, and it's actually the reason I originally started playing Super Mario Bros., which started this whole collection. And Mario Kart, together with sometimes other Mario games like the Mario and Sonic series, Mario vs. Donkey Kong and more. And that was basically it for a bit. I mean, yes, I got a DSi when I was 6 years old, and yes, that was amazing for me at the time, but it didn't really change that much because it was still just playing all the same games I was playing before, just on another DS. That is, except the camera mode of the DSi, which has, to put it lightly, been very well used by young Julian and his siblings. I remember a time where I had like 2,000 photos on that thing, but at some point I've gone through them and deleted almost all the just black or completely unusable pictures, so that I now have an SD card full of really great memories, which I otherwise wouldn't have had. For Christmas 2010, my parents decided they wanted to buy something different than usual. They wanted to buy a game console, and as the Wii was very heavily targeted towards the whole family, they decided to go with that, and that also explains why I bought another Wii for myself last year, as this one was not mine alone, and I can't just put it into my room and completely block all the others from using it. But as I bought another one and already talked about that, there is nothing really much I can say here that would not be just a repeat of what I said earlier. So, moving on to the next and actually last console from me, my parents finally decided that it was time to get another console because my sister really wanted to play SingStar, and that was not available on the Wii. So, Christmas 2015, me and my siblings unpacked a PlayStation 4 and a couple of games for it, including Rayman Legends, which is my absolute favorite PS4 game that I have played to this day, Worms Battlegrounds, which I've played once, didn't really understand and haven't touched since, and of course SingStar, but not the normal version. Instead, it was like Frozen branded one, which I've played a bit with my sister, but it just isn't my type of game. And I think that is all the games we got that day. I'm just going to list all the other games we have and give a quick opinion about them. So, first I have Detroit Become Human, which I would give a 7.5 out of 10. The second one is Crash Bandicoot N. Sane Trilogy, which is damn near Rayman, but a bit behind as there is no multiplayer. And Brothers, which I have not played that often, but seems pretty good as well, and even kind of has multiplayer if you let 2 people hold the same controller with 1 hand each. Just Dance 2019, which I have not played at all and have no intention of doing so. Diana Sisters Twisted Dreams Director's Cut, which my sister has played a lot more than me, but from what I've seen also seems like an okay to pretty good game. Minecraft PlayStation 4 Edition, which I don't think needs anything said about it, as literally 2/3 of the contents of this channel is Minecraft. Journey Collector's Edition, which I've not played a single time and have no idea what it's about. Ratchet and Clank, which I've also never played, and all 3 parts of Dark Souls, which I don't really like that much, but my brother does, so at least someone plays it.
I got my Xbox 360 in 2012. I turned 7 years old by then and had requested a console for my birthday and Minecraft as a game to come with it. I still have the Xbox and I've received a variety of games over time, of which I'll show some. The games I got were the following. Minecraft, where for the first couple of months I didn't know how to do anything because I was not holding the right trigger on the Xbox controller to properly break anything. So I literally just walked through all the worlds expecting something to happen until my brother showed me how it's done. SpongeBob Truth or Square, which is a neat little SpongeBob game where you go through a bunch of levels to save the Krabby Patty formula. Licensed SpongeBob games were usually pretty good, and this one was no exception. Need for Speed. I literally don't remember doing anything in the game, probably due to the fact that I probably didn't do anything in the game, but I heard it's good. I guess. Sims 3. I would have loved actively playing this, and this would have easily been my most played game with Minecraft if the thing didn't crash all the time or randomly didn't save anything I did. There were some pre-installed games on the Xbox too, mainly some car racing games similar to Need for Speed, where my friends and I crashed into buildings and got super fast. It was definitely fun to say the least. As previously mentioned, nothing really comes close to the amount I've played Minecraft though, and it was always my favorite game. The SpongeBob game was also played a lot, not really because I played a lot, but because I always had a friend over who loved playing it on my Xbox while I was doing something else. I don't really remember the time I got the DS Lite that well. I remember it was Christmas somewhere in the first half of the 2010s, and my grandma got me one along with some games. One of which was Kingdom Hearts, where I didn't really understand what to do at any time. It seems to have a pretty large following. I don't know if I was just too dumb to get the game back then, but you know what, that's probably an accurate explanation. Some weird Justice League themed game which I never really understood too. I just kept walking all the time and killing enemies without really knowing what the point of it all was. Also, a SpongeBob game. SpongeBob the Yellow Avenger. A pretty fun SpongeBob game, again, although I got stuck at the part where you need to find Sandy's house. I don't really know if I ever found that out, to be honest. And that SpongeBob game was pretty much my most played game. I also got a Nintendo 2DS. I think I received it on my birthday in 2014, or at least that would make the most sense. I had the brilliant game Tomodachi Life, I don't know if you pronounce it that way, which is honestly just a great game. It was really big around summer of that time, and I've watched a bunch of Let's Plays about it on YouTube and wanted it so badly. Another game I had was New Super Mario Bros. For the 3DS. Played on the 2DS. It was just a relatively fun and simple Mario game in its usual structure. I am not sure if I ever got to the end though. Also, Super Smash Bros. For the 3DS. I was walking around the supermarket, pointed at the game and bought it with a thought in mind, I've heard good things about it. I know a lot of people are going to be angry at this, but I didn't really enjoy it that much. It seemed like a cool game, just not my type, but who knows, it's been ages since I've played Smash. Maybe I'll find it good all of a sudden. But there was one console I haven't mentioned yet, for a reason. I mean, it's seen as the most fascinating endeavors of the video game industry. It revolutionized what it means to play, to be a gamer, to live. I'm of course talking about the VTech Smile!
You can stay up 1 hour later if you play your V-Smile.
V-Smile, the educational video game that turns game time into brain time.
You are a genius!
Now, some of you might know the VTech Smile, some of you probably don't. It's a video game console for toddlers, which was basically one of my first consoles ever. And let me tell you, I got me some amazing games for that console. Check it out. First of all, a Winnie Pooh game where you collect honey and you do something, I don't know, it's been years since I've played it, I forgot it. Some game where you play football or soccer or whatever, I don't remember anything from the game except, well, that. And a game about Mickey Mouse. There was a game about Mickey Mouse. I could spend ages talking about this amazing, groundbreaking console, but I played it so long ago that I basically forgot most of the stuff that it could do. Wait, so doesn't that mean you couldn't spend ages talking about that console? Yeah, okay, shut up. And, well, that is basically it for this video. If you liked the video, consider liking and subscribing for more content like a review of the TV show Shivering Truth, The Shivering Truth, some Minecraft, and more in the future. Also, we have a Discord server that you might want to join. The link is down below. Bye.